Welcome to the tutorial video for Of Dungeons Deep. First thing I wanted to go over was the basic components of the game. What we have here is the advanced prototype for the game. All the cards just have icons. They look really nice, but this is obviously not the finished product. You can see examples of the finished cards on the Kickstarter page. They all have beautiful illustrations by Derek Bacon. What we have here are 4 decks on the top here. Each deck has 8 cards, and these are your heroes in the game. You also have 8 decks down here that, 4 decks down here that make up your Henchmen decks, and they each have 4 cards in them. You have 7 dice. You also have 40 health trackers. These are the wooden ones, wooden heart-shaped health markers that will be coming in the collector's edition, these exact style here. These ones are just for the prototype. The collector's edition will have nice fancy gems like the ones that were used in Dig Down Dwarf. But the base game will be using wood cubes to start off. Hopefully we hit some stretch goals and we can maybe change that. What we have here is your dungeon deck, which is basically 28 cards consisting of a bunch of different bad guys and some treasure cards. And we'll go over these in detail a little bit later on. I just wanted to give you a basic idea of what comes in the game. Okay, I wanted to go over the basic setup of the game. The first thing you're going to do is take your dungeon deck. You're just going to thoroughly shuffle it, and you're going to draw 21 cards from the deck. So with the base game, that basically means you're going to be removing 7 cards, and those will be out of the game completely, and you'll be placing this deck to draw from. You'll take all your treasure tokens. No one gets any of these to begin the game, and just place them next to the dungeon deck. Then you'll be divvying out these heart-shaped tokens that symbolize your character's health. Each player starts with 10 of these, so you'll give each player 10 of them regardless of how many players. This game can be played solo and can be played up to 4 players. So then you will divvy these out. We'll just pretend we did that. Each player gets 10. And then the drafting begins for the heroes and the henchmen. Let's go over that. Drafting is done fairly simply. We use a snake draft. If you're not familiar with the term, you'll understand it in a moment. Basically, you randomly choose one player to go first. Probably the easiest way to do that is each player rolls a dice, since there's dice included in the game. So whoever rolls the highest will get to choose their hero first. So let's say the player to my right, he chose first. Maybe he wants the knight, so he'll take the knight deck. Then I'll get to go next because then the draft order moves in a clockwise manner. So then maybe I want to be the alchemist. Another player wants to be the wizard. Maybe we're only playing a 3-player game, so nobody's going to get this barbarian deck. So that'll be removed from play. Now the player who chose their hero last will get the opportunity to choose their henchman first. So the person who chose this wizard will then get to pick whatever henchman they want to add to this deck. And the important thing here is there's good combinations and not so good combinations. Some combinations of heroes with henchmen can be a little bit riskier than others. Some really work well together, and it's sort of something that you learn throughout playing the game. However, I will say that regardless of whatever 2 you pick, it's a very well balanced game, so that there's no real way of messing this up. It's just sort of a preference of the player. Do you like to play a little bit more strategically, or do you want to play a little bit more with a little bit more luck? So each one of these decks plays quite differently. So when you add these 2 together, you're going to have a unique experience every time you play. So this player here, since they went last choosing their hero, they will choose first for their henchman. So maybe he wants to add the cut purse along with the wizard. That makes a nice little combination. Then it will go backwards, counterclockwise. So I chose second before, I will choose second now, and I will probably go with, let's go with the vagabond. And the first player who chose the knight first has to choose last, and maybe he'll go with the witch hunter. Finally, this henchman that wasn't chosen, the hedge mage, that'll be removed from play. Now, certain players are going to be getting dice. Every hero gets one dice that matches their color. So the knight is the blue, so they'll get the blue dice. The wizard is purple, they'll get the purple dice. My alchemist is my hero, and she is green, so I will get the green dice. And I also have chosen the vagabond. He is all about luck. The red one is supposed to go with the barbarian, I should mention, so that's removed from play. The vagabond is all about rolling dice. So if you like rolling dice, you're going to like the vagabond. He's a gambler. So he gets 3 dice. So whenever these cards are used in play, you'll roll a dice to see how much damage you do. Usually you have a set number based on how many skulls are on your cards. So that's how the draft works. You have your characters cards, you have your decks, you have your dice. Once you have your cards in hand, your deck, you will just shuffle them together, and that'll create your draw pile, and you'll just place that to the side, maybe down to your left hand side. Think of Dominion. And that's basically how you draft and how you're ready to get ready to play. Okay, now we're ready to set up a level of the dungeon. Now, of Dungeons Deep works in rounds. There are 7 rounds to the game. Each round is to be considered one level of dungeon exploration. So how this works is you basically just reveal 3 cards. Now, I'm going to play just a 2-player game to keep it very simple so you guys can understand the basic rules. So I revealed the Gazer enemy. I reveal a Brigand. And I reveal a Cyclops. Okay. Now the first thing the players are going to want to do, regardless of how many players, is sort of look at these cards and see how powerful each one of these cards are. How you're going to do that is these little hearts here. There's different numbers on them based on the number of players. Since we're playing a 2-player game, in order to defeat this Gazer, we're going to only need 10 points of damage. The Brigand's going to require 15, and the Cyclops is going to require 18. So that's the most difficult enemy in this level of the dungeon. Now, this next icon down here, with the little, looks like a mace, that tells you how much damage this enemy will do to one of us players if we are unable to defeat this enemy before the level ends. This next little symbol here, sort of an 8-pointed symbol, tells us what this enemy is weak to. So whenever we play a card that does that type of damage, we can apply that type of damage to the card. We'll see how that works in a minute. So each monster has something they're prone to. So a Gazer, if you use a fire damage to a Gazer, it's going to do typically double the damage. Lastly, you see the star here. If you're the player that if you actually as a team defeat that card, but you're the player that did the most damage, you're going to gain this card into your hand. And this, at the end of the game, this is your victory point condition. So whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game is going to win. This one will give you 1, this will give you 4, and the Cyclops will give you 5. The last thing I want to talk about on this card might be a little difficult to see, but down here you have the item that this enemy is carrying. In the finished product of the game, the item, this whole information on the bottom here, is reversed 180 degrees. That way when it's in your hand, you're not confused with all this information about the monster because he's already gone. You'll be flipping this card around and all this information will be face up this way, so that you'll look at it in your hand like this with the rest of your cards. And the information down here will be a picture illustration, what the name of the item is, and what that particular item does. And each one of these items, like I said, is going to go into your discard pile if you're the one that actually gets it. And eventually, when you run out of cards, which won't take long, the first 2 levels of the dungeon will burn through your first 12 cards. And then in the 3rd level of the dungeon, you're going to be shuffling your discard and then drawing from that. So cards that have been added to your discard are eventually going to start coming into your hand. And this is a nice organic and thematic way for your character or your group of characters to grow and advance in power. Let's take a look at how the combat works. Okay, so we have these cards revealed. Let's show you how a round of this game works. The first thing each player is going to do is, after they've looked at both of these, all the cards that are in the dungeon, is they're going to draw 6 cards into their hand to form their hand for this round. Okay. Now, for the purposes of this being a tutorial video, I'm going to obviously keep all these cards out for everyone to see. My opponent is going to be drawing 6 cards off the top as well to form their hand. Let's see what I have here. I have a roll for it card, which will deal damage equal to whatever I roll on a dice. I have a couple, looks like I have 3 standard attack cards that do just set amounts of damage. I got a 2, a 3, and a 4. Then I have 2 poison attacks that will do 3 points of damage regardless against any monster. But if that monster happens to be weak to poison, they'll do an additional 3 points of damage for a total of 6. So that's my starting hand, not so bad. My opponent is playing the wizard with the cut purse, and they have an ice bolt, an attack card, a lightning card, and a poison card, just like I have, another attack card, and a picklock card. Now this picklock card, as you can see, does a lot of damage, 8 points of damage if there happen to be a treasure chest revealed, which is a yellow card. And there are no treasure chests, so this card really doesn't help this player this round. Nor does this ice bolt, because there's no monster here that's weak to ice. Only one of these enemies is weak to fire, the other 2 are weak to poison. So I'm in a pretty good position over here. My opponent, not quite as good, but they do have some nice attack cards here. The next thing that all players can do, it's an option, is to bank 1 card. So I can look at all my cards and look at them and say, are any of these cards useless to me this round? Or maybe the dungeon itself is really particularly weak. Like maybe there's a bunch of weak monsters out here, and I have a very powerful card that I want to hold on to because the odds are the next round is going to be more difficult. So you can either, you could bank a card for any reason whatsoever, but it's optional. So in my case, I kind of like my hand, and I'm going to stick with it. My opponent, however, has this picklock card. It's sort of useless. It's only going to do 2 points of damage. So he is going to bank that card. And when you bank a card, all you do is place it face down next to you, and all players will know that that card's being banked. You have to use that card in the next round. The next thing we'll do is draw back up to 6. And he got a fireball. That's going to be pretty helpful in this round. The next thing you do is each player will look at their cards and make a decision as to which 3 cards they want to play. You will play 1 card in front of each of the enemies in the dungeon. So I'm going to look at my cards and I'm going to say, well, the Cyclops is a jerk. He's very tough. So, and I have 2 poison attacks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place one of those poison attacks here. And I'm going to hold on to this one, I think, just to sort of see what my opponent does. This Gazer's a weak card, so I'm going to play one of my weak attack cards on that. And then I have this Brigand who's kind of in the middle. Maybe I'll do my roll for it right there, just to sort of let it be up to the gods as to how this unfolds. The opponent of mine is going to look at his cards and he's going to go after this Gazer, because you know what, he might not get a lot of victory points at the end of the game, but he's going to get a really nice weapon that he's going to be able to use in later rounds. So he's going to use his fireball. He's weak to fire, so it's going to do 6 points of damage. So he's going to place that there. Ice Bolt's fairly useless. This Lightning is going to be a fairly useless card. This Poison, however, is very strong. Now this is where the game becomes a lot of bluffing and strategy, because now we have 2 enemies out here that are weak to poison. My opponent knows I'm playing the the Druid, which has poison attacks. So he knows that there's a good possibility I'm going to be going after one of these cards hard, or maybe both of them. So now he has to make the decision, which card should he go after. So let's say that he just decides that he's going to go after this card here. He's going to go after the Brigand. Maybe he likes the Boots of Speed, and he thinks that I'm going to be going after the Cyclops, because I might be going after the treasure and the victory points. And that's exactly what I am doing. And then finally he's going to play his 3 attack over here, just to sort of see where I'm at. After all players have played their cards face down, 1 card to each card, Now if there's multiple more players, 4 or 5, I'm sorry, if there's 3 or 4 players, this will be spread out a little bit. After all cards have been placed, they'll be revealed simultaneously. Now this is what makes the game so quick, is because you're all thinking, going through your cards and strategizing at the same time, and you're all placing your cards face down and revealing them at the same time. So there's no waiting for someone's turn, because everyone's turn is at the same time. So then after everyone reveals a card, everyone kind of looks and sees sort of where this level of the dungeon's at the midway point. We have this gazer here that needs 10 points of damage. I've done 2, and he's done a whopping 6. So we're already at 8 points of damage here. He's almost dead. The brigand, he's done 6, and I don't know what I've done because I have to roll my dice. So I'll roll my dice. I've done 3. I'll just place that there, indicate that I've done 3 points of damage. Cyclops, he's done 3, and I've done 6. Now what's become apparent to my opponent is that I am indeed going after the Cyclops. He knows that I don't really care so much about these two. And then what I've noticed is he's going after this brigand. So I can make adjustments, and if there's more than 2 players, if there's 3 or 4 players, there's going to be a lot of tactics and strategy going on as far as where they're going to play this next card. So after this first portion, or first phase of the round is complete, you basically repeat it. So you'll look at your remaining 3 cards, and you will have to place them in one of the 3 in each one of these available slots. So I'm going to go after the Cyclops hard, because at this point we've only done 9 points of damage and we need to get to 18. So I'm going to put that there. And then I'm not going to be able to get this gazer because he's already got so many points of damage. He's already got 6. So if I added this, I'm only going to get to 6. I'm only going to tie him, and he's going to play another card. So there's no way I'm getting that. So I'll play that here, and then I will play this here. Okay? Now, what I should mention really quickly here is that the player, if a monster is defeated, it's the player who dealt the most amount of damage that actually gets the card and the victory points at the end of the game. The player who did the second most amount of damage will get one of these tokens, which is worth 2 victory points. Now, also, if we don't reach that target number as a group, whether it's 2 players, 1 player, 4 players, or 3 players, if we don't hit the target number we need to hit, the player who dealt the most amount of damage, but we failed as a group to beat that monster, that player who dealt the most amount of damage is going to lose life equal to the number indicated here. So you really have to keep an eye out for that. And the player who dealt the second least amount of health is going to lose 1 heart from their storage of 10. So now my opponent will place his cards. Let's see what he has. Kind of some useless stuff here. But he's at the point now where he knows he's going to get this card. He's pretty certain of it. He wants to make sure he gets this card as well, so he's going to place that there. He's going to place this here, and he's going to basically give up on this Cyclops and hope that he hurts me bad. So let's see how it goes. I will reveal my cards, and my opponent will reveal his cards. And then we will sort of take account of the situation and see what cards have been defeated and which cards have not. Okay, this gazer is annihilated. I've done 5 points, my opponent's done 6 plus 3 is 9 points, so it's been destroyed, and my opponent did the most amount of damage, and therefore he will get this card, and it will basically just be tossed, if I can pick it up, on top of his cards before cleanup. And then, since I was second most, I will get one of these treasure tokens that I'll use to score at the end of the game. Now, you get something. It's sort of like a consolation prize. You're going to get something for putting in effort to beat the monster. Now, this is more apparent in a 3 and 4 player game because the players who did the least amount aren't going to get anything. But the players who both went pretty hard at that monster are going to get something. The player who did the most is going to get, obviously, the most because they're going to get an item. Next, we have the Brigand. I did 7 points of damage. My opponent did a whopping 10 points of damage, so he hit a total of 17, so the Brigand is destroyed, and once again, my opponent has won this card. So very nice move. He's doing really well starting the game. He's got 2, and then I'll get this token here. So I'm behind, but I'm not terribly behind. He's going to get 4, and this is only worth 1, so he's got 5 points, and I got 4 points here. but it should be noted he has 2 cards here that are going to allow him to do different things. Now, not all of these items are just about more attack power. A lot of them allow you to manipulate the cards that are already in play, or draw cards from your draw pile or discard pile during play to sort of have more options. So let's look at this last card here, Cyclops. I did a lot of damage here. I did 12. We need to get to 18. And look what happened. Look what this guy did to me. I needed 18 points of damage. I did 12. That's 15, 16, 17. So 17 points of damage was required. 18 was required. We only did 17. We missed it by 1. I'm kind of upset. I know it's a tutorial. I want to flip the table. What's going to happen here is I'm going to be dealt 5 points of damage. That's a lot of damage. That's half my life. It's gone. First round of the dungeon. My opponent, since he was also in on this at some level, he's going to lose 1. And that's it. This card is removed from the game completely. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your dice or whatever other dice you might have on the table, and you're going to get your cards, and you're just going to place them in your discard. Now my opponent's going to have a bunch of cards because he won 2, and he's going to place those in his discard, separate from his card that he banked. Basically, he will then just reveal your next round of the dungeon. There's a skeleton, there's a goblin, and there's another goblin. Fairly easy level of the dungeon. This player here has a banked card, so he's going to draw 5 more cards, so there should be 5 more because you start with 12. So he's going to have his starting hand here. I'm going to have, obviously, my 6 as well, and I have my cards for my next round. You will continue doing this for 7 levels of the dungeon. At the end, whoever has the most points wins. We'll take a look at scoring next. Okay, so me and my opponent, we have completed the game. We've played through 7 levels of the dungeon, and we've managed to both survive. If you happen to lose all of your health tokens, you can spend one of these treasure tokens from your thing to roll a dice to add more. So you're not always, there's no player elimination. So the worst thing that can happen to you is that if you have no treasure tokens, which is fairly unlikely, usually you're going to lose. If you're going to lose all your life, it's going to be in the 3rd or 4th round. It's very hard to die in the first 2 rounds. So if it does happen and you don't have any treasure tokens to spend, you're considered incapacitated, and you have to go to the inn for rest. So you miss 1 round of the dungeon. It's not going to hurt you too terribly, but it happens rarely, because typically you're going to have some of these to spend. You're going to roll your dice, and you're going to replenish your life. So the game's ended. We're going to take a look and see how we did. So I'm going to go through my cards here and see that I have a dragon. That's the toughest monster in the game. I defeated him. I got the skeleton, another skeleton, and that is it. Okay. My opponent has gotten 2 treasure cards. We'll go over that in a second. Goblin, that gazer, and the brigand. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to add up our scores. I have 3, 3, and 7. Looks like a 1, but it's a 7. The font has changed. But that's a 13 right there. I get 1 for each of my hearts that I still have left at the end of the game, my life tokens. So that's 13, 14, 15. Each one of these is worth 2. So that's another 12 points right here. So I have 15 and 12. I have 27 points. Okay. My opponent has 4, 1, and 2. So that is 7. And then treasures sort of work differently as far as victory points. The more of them that you obtain, the more points you gain. So he has 2, so they're worth 5 victory points. So you add 5 to that 7, so you got 12. He has 3 hearts, so that brings him to 15. And then he has 5 of these treasure tokens, which is another 10 points. He's at 25. So the game ends, and I am the victor. And this is a tutorial video, and I stack the decks, so I take no pride in winning. That's basically how the game plays. So you're going to be choosing your hero, you're going to be choosing your henchman, you're going to be going into 7 levels of the dungeon, bluffing your way through, and you're going to try to come out the victor by collecting the most victory points that you can gain in a couple of different ways. You're going to gain them by not dying, by keeping your life high, by getting some of these treasure tokens, and by defeating enemies and gaining treasures in the dungeon itself. Next, we're going to look at just a few of the cards to give you an example of what the different heroes and henchmen are like. Okay, the last thing I sort of wanted to go over is some of the cards in the game, just to sort of give you an idea of the different heroes and henchmen that the base game comes with, and some of the items that you can acquire throughout the course of the game, and how those change the feel of the game and how the game plays. So the first thing we're going to look at is a couple of these monster cards, and first we'll start with the skeleton. He has bone meal, so if you defeat the skeleton, you're going to get bone meal, and in subsequent turns later on in the game, you're going to be able to play this card. It's going to deal 4 points of holy damage, which is pretty powerful. And also, when you play this card, you can take one card from your discard pile, any card, and basically resurrect it and put it into the bottom of your draw pile, which means you're going to get that card sooner. So obviously you're going to want to use this card, take one of your better cards that you've already used in your discard, and cycle it back over to your draw pile. You're going to get to that card a little bit quicker, and it's going to give you a nice little advantage. That's a fairly complicated, not too complicated, but kind of a complicated one of the items. Here's a real simple one. The Dragon Blade deals 7 points of damage regardless of what weaknesses you might have. Very powerful single attack. Brigand, Boots of Speed, deals 4 points of melee damage, regular damage, and to any card in the dungeon regardless of position. So if I play this here, and say this is my 3 enemies, I have my 3 enemy cards, I play this one here, at the end, once everyone's played all their cards, I can say, oh, he's not attacking this guy, he's attacking this guy. So it's thematic in the sense that the Boots of Speed sort of allude to the idea and concept that you're sort of sneaky and you can move around and get away with things other players can't. Lastly, we'll look at this Vision Dagger. The Gazer has it, deals 4 points of damage, and allows you to look at the top 2 cards in the dungeon deck. So you get a sort of a glimpse into the future, into what cards might be coming, well, not might, what cards will be coming up next. So that's it. You have a bunch of other ones. You have the Goblin Blade, you have Lightning Wands. These wands are nice if you're playing with 2 characters that are melee. Now all of a sudden you have the ability to cast spells. So you have a bunch of different cool items like that you will get to either strengthen what type of cards you have in your standard hand, or diversify your hand. Like I said, you might have 2 melee type characters, and all of a sudden you can cast spells. So let's take a look very quickly at these different type of characters so you get a kind of a feel and flavor for them. First we have the Barbarian, and as you would imagine, he's just a flat out melee character. He has no cards that deal any kind of magic, no holy damage, no poison, no fire, no ice. So he does just strict attack amounts. So he's a very simple character to play, really good for new players. But he's also slightly risky, because what you're seeing here, especially here, is he has the whiff card. It does nothing. It's just a card in your hand that does nothing, no damage or anything. But that's made up for the fact that he has this 7 attack, which is the most powerful single attack card in the game besides the Dragon Blade itself. So his attacks are either really high or they're really low. He also has a roll for it card, which means he gets to roll a dice to see how much damage he does. And each character has a special ability card. Now, as you can feel, as you get the sense for the feel of this Barbarian character, it's very thematic. It's sort of an all or nothing melee character. He's taking wild swings, so often he's going to miss or do little damage, or he's going to hit and he's going to connect and do lots of damage. He also has this Cleave card, which does 2 points of damage, and this card attacks the card in front of it and on both sides. So if you play it on the middle dungeon card, you're going to deal 2 points of damage to all the cards. So this is a good way, not necessarily to do a lot of damage to the card you're placing it in front of, but it's a good way to add an additional 2 points of damage to another card that you're playing cards against. That's your Barbarian. The Knight is more of a controlled melee character. Again, has no special abilities as far as fire and magic, but has some very solid attacks. They're all more middle of the road. There's no 0 and there is no 1 attack. But it's all evened out. It's very balanced with the Barbarian. It's just a little bit more controlled. Also has a roll for it. Each one of the heroes has a roll for it card and a matching dice. And each hero also has one real kind of special card. The Barbarian had Cleave. The Knight has Critical. And basically this card doubles the damage dealt by an attack card it is played on. So you play a card, and you do a critical attack with it, so it doubles the damage. So let's say you played this 6 on a monster, now all of a sudden you're doing 12 points of damage. You play this next. So that's a very nice card to have. The Alchemist we sort of saw in the tutorial. Not quite as powerful melee attacks as these two characters. Does have a 5, but has those 2 poison attack cards that we saw. Has a roll for it card. And its special card is the Gather Ingredients card, which when this card is played, you may draw 2 cards into your hand. And you have to play this in your first row. Obviously, you're going to play this card in your first row. You're going to draw 2 more cards. Now you don't just have 3 cards to choose from for that second row. Now you have 5 cards. So the Alchemist allows you to have more options during gameplay. The Wizard is a wizard. Does Fireball, Lightning, Ice Bolt. Ice Bolt has 1 regular attack. That's your symbol. I symbolize that sort of as the old wizard smacking someone upside the head with his staff. Your roll for it card, and another Fireball. The special ability card for the wizard is the Empower card, which basically is a critical attack but can only be used with the wizard's spells. So you can double the attack power. The attack of an Ice Bolt. So if you're fighting a monster that's weak to ice, you're going to do 6 points of damage. You play this card, now you're doing 12 points of damage. Those are your heroes. They're sort of the backbone of your party. They are 8 cards as opposed to only 4 cards. They each have, like I said, 1 roll for it card, 1 special ability, and a bunch of other things. They're all very unique, as you can tell. Now we'll move on to these henchmen. And these henchmen are kind of fun. They're not weak by any stretch of imagination, but they add a lot of character to your deck. The whole point of them is to really be something completely different. So let's look first at the Cut Purse. Cut Purse has 2 regular attack cards because it's like a rogue type character. It's going to have some attacking. It's got a poison attack, which makes sense, and then it's got a pick lock. So if a treasure card ever comes up, it's going to do a lot of damage, and you're most likely going to get it. So that's a card you can think about having if you want to add a little bit of melee to your party, and the ability to have a poison attack, and the ability to deal with treasures, because there's 4 treasures in the deck, and they do come up. So this would make it makes an obvious pair, in my opinion, with the wizard, because the wizard has no poison attack, just fire and ice. So having the ability to have poison is kind of cool to match with that. But you could also pair it with the druid, who also has poison attacks, and it really wouldn't matter. Next we have the Witch Hunter. The Witch Hunter is the only character so far that has the ability to deal holy damage. Also has 2 regular attacks that are very middle of the road, but these holy attacks are very useful. So that's what makes this character very powerful to add to your party, is that ability to deal with the skeletons and the necromancer and the wraith that are in the deck. Next we have the Hedge Mage. The Hedge Mage is sort of the wizard's kind of weaker counterpart, but there has 1 really cool card. First, it has an attack called Shard, which is a weaker version of Ice Bolt. It has a Flare, which is a weaker version of Fireball. It has this measly attack for 2, so you're thinking, what? These are all kind of garbage. Then you have this. You have the Weaken card, which is a spell that only the Hedge Mage can cast, and when this card is played, it reduces the power level of the enemy by 1 level. So if you're playing a game against the Cyclops with 4 players, you need 33 points to defeat it. You cast this Weaken spell, now you get to move it down 1. Now you only need 25, and that counts as damage, so that would be considered 8 points of damage that you dealt. So that's what makes this character pretty powerful. Lastly, we've kind of went over him. This is the Vagabond, the sort of a traveling musician. He's got a gambling problem, obviously, because all of his attacks are dice, except for this card, the Bard Song. When this card is played, you may draw the top card from your draw pile and add it here. So again, it's sort of a random attack. You're going to get 3 points of damage, and then you get to add one card from your draw pile and add it to that. So you can do a lot of damage that way, but again, it is a random attack. Those are your characters in the game, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope that you found it enjoyable and are willing to take a look at backing us on Kickstarter. Thanks.